Sidekicks, the weekly cybersecurity podcast hosted by Richmond Advisory Group's principal analysts, namely me, Christina Richmond.
And me, Rory Duncan. This podcast is your go-to partner for understanding the cybersecurity market, industry trends, and the real-world challenges of protecting organizations today. Hello, Christina.
Hey, Rory. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. It's hot, but I'm managing to stay relatively cool up here in the Cyber Sidekicks Command Center.
Well, good. I'm glad you're staying relatively cool.
And you?
So what do we have going? Yeah, no, I'm good today.
Fine.
It's cooler.
Well,
yes.
In this week's episode, we discuss that the EU is launching a plan to implement quantum secure infrastructure.
We're also talking about the security dangers of deep fake AI.
Yeah, that's an important one and a big one. In fact, it came up with a discussion we had just yesterday, didn't it?
Just yesterday, yeah.
We've also going to look at suspected scattered spider domains targeting everyone from manufacturers to Chipotle. Poor old Chipotle.
Poor old Chipotle. Wow. That's interesting, targeting a fast food chain. And then we have a special guest. Do you want to mention who that might be?
Yes, this is Nils Gerhardt, CTO of Utimaco. We'll be chatting with him about data protection and encryption, including post-quantum cryptography and various other things. And that's what's on the docket for this week, Christina.
So, as usual, we just want to shout out a reminder. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, Signal Not Noise, please do. Go to our website, richmondadvisorygroup.com, and down at the bottom, you can just put in your name and voila. And you will not only get the newsletter, but you will also get a 4-page extract from our recent AI security survey update, looking at how prepared CISOs, C-suite, and senior IT practitioners are in facing AI-powered attacks, and what would help them to prepare.
So a bunch of things have been happening this week. Never a dull day or a quiet time in cybersecurity, of course. And the first one that caught my eye was the fact that the European Union, that's the EU, has launched a quantum strategy with a focus on, they say, the development of region-wide quantum secure communications and data sharing infrastructure. This is interesting because often when it comes to quantum, the EU and the UK tends to be a kind of a step behind other countries or regions like the US or China or whatever in terms of technology development. But this is quite ambitious. The goal is to try and make the EU a global leader in quantum by 2030, so unlocking innovation and economic value. So that's quite a long-term strategy by the sounds of it. What do you think, Christina?
Well, it must be a long-term strategy. So I liken this PQC, post-quantum cryptography challenge, to that of Y2K. Maybe this is too simplistic, but
oh dear.
You know, people look at quantum as something so far off in the distance, it's not going to be a problem for them. But that's how we thought of Y2K. But the reason why Y2K, the changing of the dates in systems, was done, it was done manually, or at least in terms of software development, it was done by thousands of people. And it's the same thing with quantum, although there is probably a bigger threat here in the sense that many attackers have already been using ransomware to exfiltrate data and then housing that data for the long term with the belief that when quantum is a capability, they will be able to decrypt that data. So you may think, oh, we were ransomwared and our data hasn't been strewn everywhere when we didn't pay them. They didn't put it out in the public, or maybe they put some of it out in the public.
Yeah.
It's because they're holding back what is not encrypted, or what is encrypted, for later, so that they can decrypt it. So what I found interesting in this article, it's the InfoSec magazine article that Rory just was talking about. The first two stats they have in the article, just 5% of IT professionals said such a strategy is currently in place. So only 5% are taking steps towards getting ready for post-quantum. That would be the step that they would have to take.
Yep.
There are some standards NIST has put out. There are some new encryption tools that have been worked on that they believe will work post-quantum. So only 5% of IT pros said they have such a strategy in place, while only 3% believe it's a high business priority. And more than half, Rory, 59%, are saying they've admitted no steps have been taken.
Yeah.
So, wow.
It is a bit worrying.
It's early days, though.
Yeah, I know. I suppose for me, I always get that kind of feeling that we've been talking about quantum a lot, and we will continue to talk about quantum. What tangibly has happened and what needs to happen that it becomes sort of more reality based as opposed to, sort of a fiction at the moment. I like the fact that they've given some examples of what they would do with it. So the pilot project that they're doing includes the secure hospital-to-hospital transmission of medical data and encrypted communication between government institutions, and particularly if we're going to go down the path of sovereign everything, right? Sovereign data, sovereign technology, information, sovereign AI, whatever. Having those kind of encrypted data that sits within the EU kind of follows along with the strategy that the EU has in many other areas of technology. For me, though, the difficulty I have in being optimistic about this is the fact that, a lot of this requires innovative technology, vendors, service providers to take it to the next level. Especially in the EU and the UK, what often happens is that these firms are incubated, so the technology and the talent is brought out of, University of Oxford or, some kind of tech startup lab. Then it's bought by a firm in the US, typically those countries that have venture capital who are putting it into technology as opposed to into financial services. So one of the most innovative companies we saw that came out of Oxford University or University of Oxford was Oxford Ionics. But they've been bought by a US firm, right? IonQ, bought for 1.1 billion, making them a unicorn, right?
Wow.
They're no longer a UK or British company. They are being acquired elsewhere. And this is unfortunately what happens with a lot of the homegrown talent and technology in the EU and the UK. It gets bought by those countries that are investing, that have VCs and have other investment companies that are prepared to invest in technology. I think we're still a little bit behind, and we kind of always have been in the EU.
No, but I mean, it's good to see that the EU has launched a quantum strategy, and that is just good to see. And yes, it needs to be long term. 7 to 15 years is what they say the scenario will unfold during, and we'll see. Okay,
Fine.
Let's move on.
Yeah, the second story I had was looking at deepfakes, but also how deepfakes relating to security. And partly it's because this is a topic that comes up regularly. We saw a lot of this when we were talking with folk at RSAC. It came up in a client call yesterday when they asked, well, what do we think about this? And partly it's because of the fraud that's associated with deepfake. And as this article in the World Economic Forum points out, that the scale of the evolution of deepfakery is quite staggering. So deepfake fraud cases surged by 1,700% in North America between 22 and 2023, with financial losses exceeding $200 million in Q1 of this year alone.
In just one quarter?
Yeah, 1 quarter.
Wow.
And as it points out, and this is written by Ben Coleman, the co-founder and CEO of Reality Defender, as he points out, the accessibility of deepfake technology has, as he calls it, democratized fraud, right? Voice cloning now requires just 20 to 30 seconds of audio, while convincing video deepfakes can be created in around 45 minutes using freely available software. And the beginning of this article describes how it happened to this engineering company called Arup in this sophisticated AI-generated deepfake attack. And it led to $25.5 million being stolen.
Wow.
And
that is not chump change.
Yeah. I think when somebody sounds like your CFO, looks like your CFO, the assumption is that they are, right? And that's a good example of something that's very scary, and we need to keep talking about and try and get some more feedback and input on what the answer could be.
Well, and we had a conversation, we've had several conversations recently. One was with Rosario Mastrogiacomo from Sphere Technology Solutions when we were talking about what is identity and how do you keep the hygiene of that identity pristine. And AI is the big, it's the challenge, it's the big trump card, if you will, that says, haha, you can't catch me, you don't know what my identity is. And then yesterday we were chatting with another company and they were saying, these non-human identities, the service accounts, standing up SaaS platforms, all being done by agentic AI is the same worry. So we've got AI generated deepfakes. We've got agentic AI creating new identities on behalf of the humans. And when you don't know what an identity is to begin with, because the agentic AI is creating new identities on your behalf, right? Going out and creating new accounts. But then there is a deep fake that is using the real human look and feel and sound, even if it is not the real human. I don't know. There's something in that crosshairs that freaks me out. And I don't know that we have an answer for this. I know there are companies working on these different aspects, but I don't think we have an answer yet, Rory.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, but and this is not going down a rabbit hole. Don't worry, there is a point to this. But I read quite a lot of books about there's a chap called Andy McNabb. He was in the British SAS, so the Special Air Service, and the training that they were given as soldiers was often the case of, what to do when you're captured. Often they'll be forced to appear in front of a video camera, make some kind of confession, or, talk about something that they're being forced to talk about under pain of death or whatever. And one of the things that they were taught was, if you're being filmed and you're not sure whether people back home thinks that you're telling the truth or not, is you have a twitchy eye, or you have a tongue that sticks out at the side occasionally or something. It's your tell, as they say. And that's how they were trained to show the world whether they were being coerced or not, or whether it was real or not. So I thought that was interesting. I wonder if we have to have tells or ticks for our own personalities or our own images that show that we are real, as opposed to we are generated in our image. I think perhaps one of the downsides on AI deepfakery is the desire to make it as perfect as possible. And of course, when it comes to humans, we're imperfect, right? Our faces are our faces are a bit wonky. Our eyes move around, we stutter, maybe we and ah, we sneeze or whatever. Perhaps that might be the answer to this, right? If it looks too real, it probably not.
I like that. Maybe there's a technology that is already being developed to look for all of those imperfections as a norm, as a baseline.
It's the Moroccan carpet analogy, right? Where Moroccan carpets were never made perfectly. They always had a slight imperfection built in. One of the reasons was that each one could then be identified according to the creator, right? The imperfection would then show who actually made this amazing carpet with all this lovely wool and patterns. The other part, of course, was that many believed that you shouldn't make something that's perfect because only God can create perfection. Everything else is imperfect. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting analogy, that we can, if we build in imperfections, perhaps that might be the way to distinguish the real thing from AI generated.
So let's move on to this poor Chipotle.
Yeah.
And manufacturers being targeted by, they suspect by scattered spider domains. Tell me about that news bit.
Yeah, so scattered spider's been in the news a lot recently.
It has.
It's this kind of distributed network of hackers who are difficult to pin down because they don't really exist formally as an organization. They're kind of here, there, and everywhere. They've really just, most recently in the UK, there was a huge number of targets against retail outfits, so Harrods, Marks and Spencers, and so on. And actually, interestingly, I was just reading this morning that the police in the UK have made arrests in that particular case. So let's see what happens, because Marks and Spencers, it's only literally in the last week got its online orders working again. However, so in the US, we saw this being targeted in the aviation industry, but In the US, it's not just the aviation industry that's been targeted. The Register article also says that they aim to catch manufacturing and medical tech companies. They even
Hmm.
cite Chipotle Mexican Grill as one as a target. And
Hmm.
this is evidenced by hundreds of domains that security researchers say look a lot like phishing websites used by criminal crews. Now, we covered this last week in terms of remember the big, beautiful, hot sale? What was it called? The hot summer sale in
Hot sale
South
2025
25.
in
That's right,
Brazil.
in Brazil. That's right, in South America. Well,
Yep.
again, here we are. We've got fake websites set up to look very realistically. So this is something
Yeah.
from Checkpoint. So researchers at Checkpoint uncovered 500 such domains that follow Scattered Spider's naming conventions to spoof legitimate corporate login portals and so on, or an identity and an authentication service used by the organization. So they do have a footprint, these guys, and the more that the researchers look at what they're trying to do, the more they can identify which particular bad actor or set of bad actors is doing it. They have a kind of a signature, if you like, which is good. If we're getting better at identifying who they are and then catching them, and let's see what happens with these arrests in the UK, that might be a way forward. So this week's special guest is Nils Gerhardt, CTO of Utimaco. Hey Nils, thanks for being a guest on the show.
I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. So yeah, we wanted to have a chat with you about your thoughts, what's on the top of your mind, and so on. I think the first question we had was, yeah, what keeps you awake at night?
Oh, there's one thing that keeps me awake at night and that I really like working on solving is the whole topic of post-quantum cryptography. This is one of these things that really only happens once in your lifetime when there is a risk of a new generation of computers breaking the cryptography that we're using to safeguard our daily life, everyone's life, in fact. And we have to find countermeasures and ways to protect ourselves.
It's interesting because there was a news story that we read earlier on the podcast that was in Info Security magazine, and it was saying that only 5% of IT professionals are really looking at a strategy to defend against quantum enabled threats. And I was looking just briefly at Utimaco's report that you have, and it looks like an interesting report, and I want to dig into it on my own later. But it's just for the listeners. It's the 2025 Utimaco PQC Readiness Report, and what your study is finding is that 63% identify PKI or public key infrastructure as an urgent priority. 20% have already started their PQC migration. So all this tells me is that stats are stats, right? Niels, it's like you can use I'll do one survey, you'll do another survey. We'll have different data. But it's fascinating to me to see the spread because first of all, folks don't really know enough about it. They don't understand the dangers of post quantum. And some are preparing, but I would say it depends on the audience you're talking with. Are you talking with the high end of the enterprise or the regulated industries? They may be thinking about it more, right? So I love that. I mean, I don't love that it keeps you up at night, but I love the way you framed it, that this is something it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to work on, and that is fascinating to you. So what do you think about where people are in this conundrum and the strategy to address it?
Let me go a couple of years back. Actually, in fact, when I joined Utimaco, we didn't really see this as a big topic. I mean, we had algorithms to protect customers already at the time, but it was more like a pet project of our customers, IT or R&D departments, to play a little bit around, right? It was very scientific. There was standardization still ongoing, but a lot of that really has changed and accelerated. So when the CNSA 2.0 came out and set actual dates from what on you need to actually support quantum cryptography, that was the first step, right? But now NIST actually communicated the same dates and made very clear that from 2030 onwards, certain key length and algorithms that we're using cannot be longer be used or newly
Mm-hmm.
introduced into the market. And then from 2035 on, they are actually disallowed, meaning by that time, you need to have all of your use cases migrated. And we're using the cryptography that's the historical one, the ECCs, the RSAs. We're using that for years. So it's in every system that you can imagine. And now that has to change in the next 10 years. And the EU, actually, the EU Commission did announce the same dates now and kind of leveled with what NIST and CNSA 2.0 communicated.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of traction now. You didn't have that before. Now, really, customers wake up and say, "Oh, I need to be compliant, otherwise, I cannot do business anymore."
I mean, this is exactly what Christina mentioned earlier, which was this report, this quantum strategy that the EU has brought out. And you're right, they talk about 2030 being a milestone for having something in place. Do you think that's realistic, given how difficult it is to get a EU-wide legislation and acts in place, Nils?
I think it is realistic that customers actually look at how they convert. I mean, we will certainly see some of the use cases where customers say this is second or third priority, which may not be fully migrated by the time. But I think for like the key use cases and the essential things that need to be protected, I think that this is something that customers will look at, and will also migrate by the 2035 timeline.
And then some of the use cases, again, because this is maybe something you can reflect back at us in terms of what you've seen out there, some of the use cases that the EU mentioned in terms of pilots, they talked about projects including secure hospital-to-hospital transmission of medical data, and they also talked about having looking at encrypted communication between government institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Are those good examples? What do you see when you talk with folk out there about what they might need or want to use this for?
So everything started really with the chip manufacturers for us. I mean, chips are used in a lot of devices today. So look at the car as a good example. There are hundreds of chips somewhere at some place in this car. And the cars will be around for probably 20 years. And of course, those cars still need software updates. They are more driving computers now than there are actual cars if you compare them to historic cars, the cars we knew for a long time. And so, that in mind, that was the starting point where the car manufacturers told their chip manufacturers, we need to get ready. So, start preparing. So, that is where everything started. And then we have, of course, also customers that work in very specific environments. You mentioned interstellar objects when we got on, but this is exactly where some of the protection that uses post-quantum cryptography is being used by actually protecting satellite communication and how satellites are steered. And so this is another example of where this is starting to be used. And then of course, as we know from the report, there are certain things that are key to the security of all the digitalization cases, and that's PKI, and this is something that's picking up. So it's really an area that we see more and more demand for post-quantum cryptography.
I have to throw something in that my millennial son has said to me many times. He's a programmer, a developer, and he says, "Oh, mom, quantum's not going to happen for a long time." And there is this mindset. Now, I recognize he's a young man and he's not in the field that we're in. But it is a misconception, or maybe it's a proper conception. I don't know. But there are some major hurdles to true quantum compute, right? We've got decoherence, where the qubit starts to operate more like a standard system. Or we've got hardware and cooling. There's so many challenges. And I think for our listeners who earlier in the podcast heard me liken this to Y2K, it's a similar problem. Oh, it's not going to be a problem that the date changes from 1999 to 2000 and the systems, who cares? They have the wrong date. Does that really matter? Well, it could have been a major disruption if companies had not made huge inroads in changing those dates in their systems in terms of software capabilities. So I don't know how to get the message across, Niels, and this is the question to you. How real is quantum? Is it really coming? Why does it matter? Why should we care? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and you can, I mean, also we argue internally, is it 2030, is it 2035, or even 2040,
Exactly.
and in the end of the day, we don't have that crystal ball that tells us exactly when a quantum computer can break traditional cryptography, but we know a couple of things for certain. One is that quantum computers are extremely good also in other areas of business. And I mean, if you look at the financial industry, at pharmaceutical companies, and so there is a lot of money poured into the research of quantum computers, not for necessarily breaking cryptography in step
Right.
one, but for a lot of commercial applications. And that tells me, once that has started as a process, there will be more money. People make money out of it, and then everything gets an improvement. And over time, these systems are developing. That's one thing. And the other thing is, because we have some mathematical proofs that quantum computers can break cryptography and not just weaken cryptography, but really breaking it, meaning that in within seconds you can actually reveal data which would have taken thousands of years before, and that actually will also, of course, get state actors and others involved in this game. And so, in the end of the day, what I often say to the C-level is, so, if you think about this from a board perspective and you take your responsibility in regards to your board function and towards your company serious, and you have data that needs protection for more than 20 years, and if there's only a 10% chance that that data gets revealed in this time frame, wouldn't you act? And then it's basically a discussion really at a level where they say, yeah, I mean, fair point, right? I mean, we don't know if in 2030 or 2035 we have a quantum computer, but if there's this chance, and if I take my responsibility as a provider of security, in a serious way, then I should probably act and get moving. And there's a little bit of a side aspect as well that I want to mention. I mean, forget quantum computers for a while, for a second, but we also have other ways to attack systems. I mean, the whole topic of attacking cryptography has evolved as well. So it's always good to protect at a good and a high level with the newest standards.
Niels, how do you think the kind of future of quantum and cryptography and so on plays into this sort of geopolitics side of things, including, this desire or not for, sovereignty over IT, sovereignty over data, sovereign AI, whatever. How much do you think this has a part to play?
I think in general, I mean, since all data is encrypted, I think it will play a major role. I mean, the quantum computer that can break cryptography, as we know it today, would reveal a lot of very interesting data, right? I mean, there's already today all the data that's flowing around could be harvested and stored and then potentially decrypted later when the quantum computer becomes available. And then there's a lot of data that could potentially be used, for instance, by a state actor. So I think that in this whole geopolitical situation, cryptography, protecting data, and invest in or understanding the technology that could potentially be a threat to the confidentiality of your data, I think this is a key thing.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. It's something we brought up earlier. I have a slightly more cynical view of the future, and as I was explaining to Christina, that often the challenge we have in Europe, and by Europe I mean wider Europe, UK as well, is that we have great technology researchers from university spinouts, but then they often get bought by US firms or others who
Mhm.
have the venture capital to put in to take it to the
Mhm.
next stage. Obviously, having homegrown or European produced talent and technology is important when you start to look at sovereignty. Do you think quantum could become something that is invested more in from a European startup perspective, or do you think it will primarily go the way of AI?
No, I think quantum is definitely something that it's invested in the EU. I mean, we have certain initiatives here also to build up quantum computers and all the know-how that is required. So I definitely I think that it has been understood that it's not only AI, but it's really there are other topics as well that will fundamentally change the way technology works and one of that is quantum computers. So I'm this is definitely an area that where I see investments going into. And then I have to also say, NIST, for instance, has done or run this process in a very open way, involving the community, involving the rest of the world in the standardization. I think this was a very good initiatives how you came to the first standards in an open way. So because it's such a complex topic, you need all the researchers in the world to contribute and to potentially point out also weaknesses of the algorithms that we designed for the next for the quantum safe safety. And so this is something where the NIST has played a really good role in integrating everyone and coming with a standard solution for the global for most of the global markets, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Christina, I wondered if you had any questions on what Nils has said. I had a couple of questions on a sort of geographic basis, but was there anything you wanted to ask?
I'm really finding this fascinating, and I guess when I get really quiet like this, it's because I'm just taking it all in.
Mm-hmm.
I do think you're right, Niels, with NIST. I'm really happy that they've opened it up, and it is a very open discussion because you're right. We need all of the different researchers to come in and give us their thoughts on this. And so, do you have insight into the three new standards that NIST has offered? Do you know those? I mean, I think it would be useful for our listeners to hear what those are. And I think it's three. What I'm reading is that it's marking the culmination of an 8-year effort on their side, and they've come up with three standards. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say it's probably you could say it's four. So in the past we had XMSS and LMS as stateful hash-based signature algorithms standardized. That was around 2020. And then you know what you referred to these three standards: FIPS 203, 204, 205, MLChem, MLDSA, and SLHDSA. Those are the standards that more recently evolved, and those
Right.
standards cover both the encryption, the key encryption specifically, as well as signatures. So those are the two areas that are important to protect against. And there was another one selected to be standardized. So HQC is the name, and that one is probably going into or becoming a standard around, we believe, 2027, even though there was not a specific communication on this yet. And the good thing is, this is also not the end because since we have different applications where this needs to be used. So we have PKI for once, we talked about it. We have certain IoT applications. We have hardware that needs to run that. We need different standards. We need different standards with different properties. So some, for instance, have a larger key size. Some actually have very small signatures, which is beneficial for certain applications. And if you look at all that, we have more algorithms currently in the standardization process. In fact, we have 13 for signatures currently in the process and two more for encryption. And that is actually still a NIST run initiative to make sure, even if
Hmm.
one of these algorithms that are standardized today would be weakened for whatever reason, we have more in the pipeline for different applications. So we really
Hmm.
make this a good transition.
So that's great. And you just rattled that all off the top of your head, and we didn't even ask you to prepare for that, Niels. I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
And I have so much more reading to do. But last thoughts for you. Are you bullish? Meaning, are you positive about the quantum safe post quantum era? Or are you more bearish and cautious and worried about it? Just like, what's your gut? How do you feel about it?
I mean, I'm really certain that since we have overcome a lot of challenges worldwide, right, and we have all the new technologies we handle, AI and and you brought up the year 2000 topic, right, and we also mastered that at the time. So I'm pretty sure we'll find a way of transitioning. Will that be without any issues or certain challenges on the way? No, certainly not. I mean, it's a complex topic and there's a lot to convert, and certainly things that companies overlook. But we have also a unique opportunity to build systems that are forward looking much better and can adapt to whatever comes next. So we talk a lot about standardizing crypto agility. So how do you move from one algorithm to the next without the application that needs to change? And so that's one of the very key things. And I think if we think more about how we can make cryptography configurable, that is actually some things that we could make in or achieve in this transition to post quantum cryptography, and that actually will bring all our security posture forward. And I think this is also why this is such a unique opportunity. We all have to change, and in this change we can fundamentally implement safeguards for the future that allows us to maintain security going forward and act much faster and more agile when it comes to any further future changes to our cryptography. I think this is really, really a good opportunity.
Well, that's great. Thanks for that
I
perspective,
loved this. Yeah, I loved this chat, Niels. I think quantum is so complex, to your point, and it's energizing for me to have a new challenge to learn about. So you've really educated me, Rory, our listeners, and please come back on and chat with us again. Thank you so much for taking time with us today.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you, Nils.
Thanks a lot. It was a great chat.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great discussion with Nils. I really enjoyed that.
So fabulous. Me too. I learned so much.
Yeah.
And there's so much to know about quantum safe and PQC. And I said, when we were saying goodbye to Nils, I said, when I was studying for the CISSP, which I haven't finished, haven't got it yet, that the maths are hard. But he made it so clear from a layperson's standpoint that, oh gosh, really grateful to him for coming on.
Yeah, no, that was good. We have some fantastic guests. Each one is incredible source of information and very inspiring for what we can write about, and hopefully that's the same for our listeners out there. And I think that probably wraps up the show for this week. Christina, what do you say?
I think so. So, folks, leave us a message. You can leave us a voicemail, 90 seconds max. We'll share your voicemail if it's not too spicy. I mean, if you're razzing us, then maybe not. And you can do so on our SpeakPipe link, which is www.speakpipe.com/cyber_sidekicks. And that'll be in the show notes. Or, Rory, they can send us an email, right?
Yeah, they can, exactly. So if you'd like to send an email directly to Christina Richmond saying how awful her co-host is, you can do so at christina@richmondadvisorgroup.com. And likewise, if you want to send me an email complaining how awful Christina is, you can send that to me, rory@richmondadvisorgroup.com. And with that,
why would you even invite them to do that, Rory?
Well,
no, please send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. But if you do have complaints, do let us know. Talk about us behind our backs to the other one.
That's right. And then we can turn it into the next dramatic episode. But with that, we look forward to you joining us next week. Take care. Speak with you in episode 26 next week. Bye-bye.
Yay. Bye-bye.